By the middle of April, the afternoons had begun to carry that strange promise of warmth, even when the wind still smelled faintly of winter. I was standing behind a folding table at the food bank, handing out parcels to people who had been waiting for hours. And although my back ached and my hands were tired, I felt strangely grateful to be there. This was what I did when I wasn't working. I volunteered, I listened, I carried boxes. I tried in small ways to make life a little less cruel for people who had been forgotten. I was 32, lived alone, and sometimes wondered whether helping everyone else had become my way of avoiding the question of what I wanted for myself. By late afternoon, the line had almost disappeared when a young man stepped in front of me. He looked to be somewhere in his mid-30s, wearing clothes that were old and badly worn, yet there was something unexpectedly strong about his slender frame and something remarkably clear in his eyes. His face carried the marks of difficult years, but when he looked directly at me, I had the peculiar feeling that he saw me rather than merely looking at me. I blushed, annoyed at myself for blushing, and handed him a food parcel. And when his fingers briefly touched mine, a tiny shiver ran through me. "Thank you," he said quietly, and then he walked away before I had thought of anything clever to say. I watched him sit on a bench a little distance from the others and open the parcel, and I found myself wondering who he had been before life had brought him here. Why am I staring at him, I thought, while at the same time knowing perfectly well why. When I looked again, he happened to be looking at me too, and his gentle smile made something warm and almost ridiculous flutter in my stomach before I quickly lowered my eyes. By the time the evening light turned golden, we had finished serving everyone, and I stayed behind with the other volunteers to clean the tables and stack the empty boxes. I was carrying a bag toward the storage room when I suddenly noticed someone standing beside me, and for one startled second, my heart jumped because I hadn't heard him approach. It was the man from the bench smiling apologetically, and somehow that smile made the fear disappear almost at once. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to startle you," he said, and I answered, "No problem," far more shyly than I would have liked. "I wanted to thank you again for the meal," he said, looking down for a moment, and also he stopped, swallowed, and seemed to gather every bit of courage he possessed before looking back at me. "And also, I wanted to ask if you'd like to go out with me sometime. Maybe just a walk down by the lake." I stared at him, completely speechless, thinking that surely this was one of those strange little moments life sometimes invents when you're least prepared for them. The silence stretched between us, and I could see uncertainty slowly replacing the hope in his expression. "I'm sorry," he murmured, turning away. "That was a stupid idea. Why would a woman like you be interested in me?" Before I could think, I caught him gently by the sleeve and said, "No, wait." I could feel tears gathering in my eyes as I tried to explain that I wasn't rejecting him at all, that I was simply overwhelmed because, embarrassingly enough, no man had asked me out on a date in years. He looked at me with such quiet seriousness that I suddenly felt more exposed than I ever had on a first date. "Is that true?" he asked, and I could only nod, while a tear slipped down my cheek. For a moment, neither of us moved, and then he smiled. Not triumphantly, not possessively, but almost with relief, and said, "Then perhaps we should change that." I laughed through my tears, and somehow the sound of it made the cold evening air feel warmer. We walked together toward the lake slowly, without deciding exactly where we were going, and the city seemed unusually quiet around us. He told me his name was Dylan, and I told him mine was Melissa, as though we were introducing ourselves for the first time despite having already shared something far more intimate than names. Near the water, beneath a pale April moon, he took my hand and asked if he could kiss me, and when I said yes, his lips met mine in a brief, tender kiss that felt less like the beginning of a romance than the opening of a door I had forgotten was there. I didn't know what would happen after that evening, and neither did he. But as we stood beside the dark, shimmering lake, with our hands still joined, I had the sudden, almost magical certainty that sometimes life doesn't change with a grand gesture. It changes when two lonely people are brave enough to say yes to one another.